pleasure to be here. I've come out from Trinity College, just on the dark there, and I'd love to come and talk to all you wonderful young people. You're already young. When I was your age, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there weren't even cars, were there? I think, no, there were cars, but it was a different age, and I chose to do biology when I was about 16 or 17. I chose biology as a really interesting subject. I'm going to give you that story, right? And I'm also going to give you why it's great to be a scientist and the type of science I do, which is absolutely fascinating. I work on a thing called inflammation. Now, if you happen to play rugby and you injure yourself, let's say you sprain your ankle, that ankle gets inflamed. It gets swollen, red, sore, right? And then your body fixes that injury and you get better. And that's wonderful. And that's called the inflammatory process. The trouble is, it can go wrong. And when it goes wrong, you get arthritis, you've heard of that? You get Crohn's disease in your gut, you get MS in the brain, multiple sclerosis, you get diabetes. All these diseases involve your inflammatory system going crazy. And my lab is all about to find out what's going on there, because we need new treatments for things like arthritis or diabetes. And I'm going to give you a bit of that as well. That's what I'm going to sort of cover today. Now, as I'm in a school, I rarely come to schools, you know. I do lecture in Trinity. I lecture the first years in biology. That is 300 18-year-olds sit in front of me, and they're all tweeting each other the whole time, and it gets very annoying. But I love teaching 18-year-olds and telling them how great science is, and I tell them there's sort of 4 reasons why it's great to do science, right? I'm going to give you these 4 lessons. And lesson number 1, science is as a way to understand the world, right? So do you ever wonder who you are? Now, I know you're Irish, maybe, or whatever, but really deep down, who are you? You're a Homo sapiens, you're a species called Homo sapiens. The second thing you wonder is, where do we come from? How do we get here? And we're all evolved from very primitive life forms. Life on Earth began about 3.9 billion years ago. That's when life first begins. Why was that? How did that happen? So where do we come from? And more importantly, where are we going? Now, sadly, you're heading towards the leaving cert, right? And that horrific points race. Best of luck with that, you know. We know where we're going, we're still kind of evolving and developing, and that's another question where we're going. We hope we're going towards more understanding of science. Now, I was in school, you know, what we did in school were these things, you know, and you do all these. We did Irish. Anybody like Irish? I hated it. We did English. That was better, I suppose. We did arts, you know. We did history, and blah, 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 right? I was drawn to science. From when I was about 15, science began to get me. And there was a key moment, remember vividly, we did this poem, I remember, by John Keats. Have you heard of John Keats, the famous poet? Do you still do Keats? You will for the leaving cert, maybe. And I was doing the leaving cert, and our English teacher said, learn this poem. And I have to learn this poem off, you know. Look at this, thou still unravaged bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and stuff. That bored me, right? I thought, why am I learning this? And then, I remember in 5th year, we had a biology teacher, and he read a different poem for me, and that poem was called DNA. And I said, that's a much more interesting poem, that is. That's the basis for life itself, because DNA is the material that all our bodies are made of, is the recipe for life. All life on Earth has DNA as the recipe, and that really got my imagination. And of course, that molecule was discovered by a guy called James Watson, and there he is, and I've met him a few times. Watson and Crick were very famous. They discovered that DNA was the basis for genes and hereditary and the basis for life. And so that was last summer. He came to Dublin and I interviewed him. And there, for some reason, he's doing a Nazi salute there. We're not quite sure why, but he's a bit of a controversial figure. But great to meet Watson. And there, look, the Irish found DNA anyway. There's a torque bracelet from 1000 BC that was dug out. That's got the same structure as DNA. So we Irish should really claim DNA. And then I came across this guy, Charles Darwin, and he really got me even more. He explained where we come from. He came up with the theory of evolution. He wondered, he asked this question, where do all these species come from? And he said, we're all evolved from more primitive life forms. And that's 99.999% true, right? Every scientist believes we all came about because of evolution. And Darwin was the guy who was the one who came up with that theory, and everything he said was correct. There's evolution in action. You know, it starts off great, and then it all goes horribly wrong. And you may end up doing that for the rest of your life, sitting in front of a computer screen, unless you choose science. Don't go and work for a bank. They're awful people, right? Or a building society. Even worse, a credit union. Don't go and work for them either. Do science, because you won't end up like sitting in that. Something went wrong in evolution anyway, and we all end up. But evolution is a very important way to explain life. So number 1, it's a great way to understand the world, where we come from and who we are. Second question, all that counts in science is your own ability. Now what do I mean by that? Well, I went to Trinity and did biochemistry, which is a kind of a molecular type of science. Got interested in sort of biochemistry and diseases. And then I went to London to do a PhD, because to become a professional scientist, you've got to do a doctorate, it's called PhD, and that's when you learn to be a research scientist. And I decided to go to London. It was the mid-1980s, just like it is now. There were no jobs in Ireland in the mid-1980s. We all emigrated. Half my class in Trinity emigrated, would you believe? Because the mid-80s was pretty dismal. You know, came back, but it was still pretty bad. Went to London, I went to this place. This is called the Royal College of Surgeons. And that place was famous, again, for sort of inflammation, my area, I work on inflammation. And I chose that place because I wanted to work on inflammation, and I'll give you more about that in a minute. And I went there, and 3 months of arriving there, a very famous visitor came. This guy here, his name is John Vane. He had been in the Royal College of Surgeons and won the Nobel Prize about 4 years before I went. He discovered how the drug aspirin works. Now aspirin, you know the little aspirin, you take aspirin, it works by stopping inflammation, and he discovered that. And he came to visit us, and this was like having, you know, Elvis Presley exhumed, and he came in, and we all saw him, we were all in awe of him, Nobel Prize winner. And I met him, and I shook his hand, and he got up and he gave a talk about his research, and about a third of the way through the talk, I suddenly saw something wrong with his talk. I said, there's something wrong here, I kind of spotted a mistake. And at the end, I put my hand up, and I asked him a question. And this is me from Ireland, I've been there about 3 months. They couldn't understand my accent, you know. And I said, I can't remember what it was now, but I said, you got something wrong. And he said, you know, you're right, that's a very interesting question, come up to me afterwards. And I went up afterwards, and I said, yeah, you're right, I got something wrong. And he said, I don't know the answer, but I'll write to you. And he wrote to me. Remember, have you ever heard of pens and paper? We used to use them. He wrote, and he explained the answer, and I have this letter from John Vane, and I thought, what a great profession. A kind of a guy from Ireland could ask a Nobel laureate a question, he doesn't know the answer. And all that counts is your ability. It didn't matter your accent or where you're from or your background. All that counted was your ability. And that really attracted me. This is a great thing to be in. All that counts is your own ability. And that was the second reason why I wanted to become a scientist. I realised I could make a difference. And all that counts is your own ability. And then the third lesson, the thrill of scientific discovery. The reason why science is so great is because we're constantly trying to discover brand new things about the world. And if you're a biologist, it's life you're working on. If you're a chemist, you're a fan of Breaking Bad. See Breaking Bad? Chemists make new molecules. Physicists wonder about time and gravity. You know, you're trying to find out new things about the world. And that really got my imagination. I thought discovery is a wonderful thing. And here's my lab. That's a joke. This is the Starship Enterprise. To boldly go, you know. And that's what science is all about, trying to discover new things. And that really got me. There's a picture of me when I was young. Now let me give you one little tiny example of this, okay? So, we have a big interest in cancer as well, because cancer obviously is a big problem. We need to understand more about cancer, we need new drugs to treat it. This, about 3 months ago, and I just took this recently as one example of how wonderful science is. This creature here, right, it's called the naked mole rat, right? It lives underground, never comes up, lives underground, it's blind, two strange teeth, it never ever gets cancer, never, okay? And scientists wondered, why would that creature never get cancer? And they discovered, about 3 months ago, why that is. And amazingly, this little creature makes a chemical. Now we get a bit technical now. The big trouble with science is the words can be very problematic because there's all these complex science words. And this is the one, HMWHA, is a chemical this creature makes. It's a sticky, sugary substance that allows them to squeeze through tunnels because they live underground. And it turns out that chemical kills tumour cells. Okay? So here we have a brand new anti-cancer chemical made by the naked mole rat. It kills human tumour cells as well. And that's now in clinical trials for different types of cancer. And who would have thought, just that scientists wondered, why do these mole rats not get cancer? And they find they make this strange gooey stuff that kills tumour cells. And again, that illustrates the joy of this and the discovery that you can make out of this. And then, of course, that brings me on to my last lesson, which I'll spend most of the time on. It's great to discover things, because we're all curious. I mean, humans, we puzzle about everything the whole time. You know, that's one of our key traits. We're curious about the world. And that's great. You can solve a puzzle. And the puzzle might be that mole rat, you know, not getting cancer. In my case, we're trying to solve the puzzle, why do you get arthritis? And we still don't know. So you solve puzzles. But very importantly, it can bring great practical benefits. So science can be a great thing to help humanity. And that's a wonderful thing to have, of course. And here's an example. Remember this guy Sarkozy? Did you ever hear of him? He was the president of France up to quite recently. He made a speech and he said, without basic research, meaning science, there can be no applications. After all, electricity and the electric light bulb were not invented by incremental improvements in the candle. Isn't it amazing? So to go from candles to light, electric light bulbs, massive science was needed, big electricity, all these wonderful discoveries had to be made in basic science to go from a candle to a light bulb, and that's a really good illustration of that. And then, you know, once you're into science, and I was into it, as I say, beginning in 5th year, I guess, eventually you pick an area to specialise in, and it could be physics, it could be the Large Hadron Collider, it doesn't really matter, it's all science. I myself chose inflammation. I picked that area because I liked it. And I liked that the sort of lecturers we had in Trinity inspired me, and you read things. It's complicated what makes us do what we do, I guess. But I was drawn to that, and in particular the molecules. So I'm obsessed with how molecules work. And it's a fascinating area. As I said, it was the ancients, like we go back to the ancient world, the very first medical texts describe inflammation, because you can see it. You know, if you sprain your wrist, it goes red and sore, say, or you get a bee sting, or if you're infected, of course, if you cut yourself, that gets very red and inflamed and sore. So ancients could describe this. And the first drugs ever described then in ancient texts were anti-inflammatory drugs, because obviously inflammation is a problem, and these early doctors would describe drugs. And the very first drug ever recorded is in an Egyptian papyrus, 1550 BC, and there's a drug listed on this, and guess what it is? It's cannabis, you know, which is marijuana. That turns out to be a very medicinal substance. And that was first described as an anti-inflammatory for eye inflammation. Little man here somewhere smoking weed, I imagine. As cannabis, you know, it's the first little hieroglyph describes an anti-inflammatory, and that was the very first description of an anti-inflammatory. And there it is, you all get this, you know, redness, swollen, sore, you know, everybody gets inflamed, they're chilblains. And there are the 4 signs: redness, heat, pain and swelling. They're the 4 things that happen. It goes red, it gets hot, it's sore, gets swollen, and that happens normally. And of course what's very interesting is this Roman guy was the first to describe those, 25 AD, that's the first record of those signs. And then when I went to London, the place I chose to do my PhD was famous for inflammation, and that's because this guy, John Hunter, he was there, and he was the first to say, look, inflammation is very important, and he wrote a book about 1800 on inflammation, look, a treatise on the blood, inflammation and gunshot wounds. He was funded by the army, because if you get shot and a bullet goes in, it gets all inflamed and sore. And he said inflammation is good for you. Look, it's not a disease, but a salutary operation means it does good, either there's some violence or some disease. So he knew inflammation was good for you. In other words, it happens after injury, but then he spotted when it can't accomplish that purpose, it does mischief. And he knew that when inflammation goes wrong, you get these diseases. And that's when it really gets interesting. Because all these diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, maybe you know people with that, osteoarthritis, asthma, maybe I bet some people here have asthma, it's very common, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's, colitis, all of these are inflammatory. It's where the inflammatory system goes wrong. Now the best way to think of this is as follows. When you injure your tissue, it gets infected usually or gets damaged, your immune system comes out to fight that infection. That's what the immune system does, fights infection, and it also then repairs the damage. Repairs it and puts it back to normal, okay? It's when that goes wrong that we get all these diseases. It's a bit like a civil war. So your immune system is there to fight the invader when you're attacked by bacteria. If it turns on yourself, it's a civil war, and all these diseases are a result of this dysfunction, and we don't know why that is. We've no idea what causes any of these diseases. We know some of the bits that go wrong, because we know about the immune system, but we still don't know what causes them, and that's one of the things my lab in Trinity is trying to work on. We do know one thing, and that is this cell type's very important. So as you probably know, your blood has lots of white blood cells, and these white blood cells fight infection, right? And the best cell of all is called a macrophage, which means big eater. Macro means big, phage means to eat. And these cells engulf bacteria, or take up damaged tissue that's, say, from a sprain, and then create inflammation, and then fix the tissue. And these cells, we work on these. This is from my own lab. These are 2 macrophages here side by side. There's the nucleus of the cell, and these are looking for bacteria. They're looking for damage to fix it, and that's the key cell type of the inflammatory process. So now we have the enemy in our sights. Because if I take a rheumatoid joint from your granny, say, it's got rheumatoid, take her joint, rip it open, she'll squeal loudly, which is always fun. In that joint, it's full of those cells. The joint is full of these nasty macrophages. They're the cell we must consider. I've got even more pictures. There's 2 more of them, look. 2 big macrophages there. Here's what they do. They eat things, right? That's not a real one. That's a macrophage taking up bacteria, because it's very good at dealing with nasty bacteria in various ways. And here's another one from my own lab again. They're tiny, of course. This is a special type of microscopy called the electron microscope. It can see things that are really, really small. They're about 5 nanometers across, these, right? So 5 billionths of a meter across, and there's some macrophages. You can see that they're putting out all these little dangly bits, because they're sampling the environment, like arms, and then taking things up, you know, and then becoming turned on. And this is the cell that we work on a lot. And there they are, they drive then, these macrophages, they drive the immune response and they drive inflammation, and we're absolutely obsessed with them. And I want to give you one little science story that my lab discovered, because remember, if you're a scientist, you're supposed to discover new things, that's the mission. And my lab has been working on this for 20 years or so, and we made a discovery about, what, 2 years ago now, I guess, which we published, because when you discover something, you publish a paper, and they invite you to conferences, and it's all great fun, and you talk to your other scientists, it's wonderful. We discovered a particular protein in the macrophage called NLRP3, horrible name, right? That little protein is like a little sensor. And it senses bacteria, viruses, fungi, damaged tissue if you spray it, bad stuff is sensed by that protein. And it drives inflammation. And that's a key like a cog in the machine that gets turned on, if you like. And we began working on that. And in particular, and most unexpectedly, we found this protein that had a key role in something called type 2 diabetes. Now, this is unusual. You've probably heard of diabetes, have you? So diabetes is where your body can't really handle sugar. That's as simple as it. Very common again, diabetes. And there are 2 types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. There's a hormone called insulin, have you ever heard of that? And when you eat food, your pancreas makes insulin, and the insulin allows your body to take up glucose, sugars, okay? If you can't make insulin, you have type 1 diabetes, you don't make it. And that's normally because your pancreas is destroyed by your immune system, in fact, it's another immune disease. Type 2 is different. Type 2 is you make plenty of insulin and the cells won't sense it. The cells cannot respond to insulin, so glucose doesn't get taken up. It's almost as if your cells, which are hungry for glucose, say, after a meal, they don't listen to insulin anymore. They start ignoring insulin and glucose starts to build up. And diabetes is all about glucose building up in your blood and all the symptoms you get because of your system not taking enough glucose. And it turns out that this NLRP3 is a key sensor of bad stuff made in our bodies that causes type 2 diabetes, right? Now, how do we get onto that? Well, here you go. This is it. It doesn't respond to insulin, that's the first thing. What's the main cause of type 2? Obesity is the main cause of type 2 diabetes. 80% of obese people will develop type 2 diabetes. If they lose weight, the disease goes away. So obesity is the key factor, and it means your blood glucose stays high, you feel tired because you can't get energy, you feel thirsty because of all this sugar in your blood, your body tries to drink more liquid to dilute it. You get infections because your blood is sticky now. And the one thing bacteria love is sugar. They eat sugar as well. So they grow in your blood and you get all these infections. But then more seriously, you get heart attacks, stroke. That's because your blood is so viscous. Your heart is under pressure, your brain is under pressure, you get strokes. Amputations, because all these infections destroy limbs. And then blindness, your eyes are full of sugar because all this sugar can't be taken up. And that's what happens to type 2 diabetics. It's a really horrible disease. And the question, of course, that we were wondering is, well, look, how would it work? And normally, insulin is made, glucose in your blood, muscle and liver take up the glucose. In type 2 diabetics, you become resistant to insulin, the tissues can't take it up, and the glucose builds up, it's called hyperglycemia. And that's what type 2 diabetes is all about. And look at this, there's a direct correlation with obesity. I love this, because we hate Americans, don't we? No, we love them, I'm just Americans. Mass obesity, look, between 1990 and 2010, obesity, look, type 2 diabetes, same, so correlates with obesity in the US. And I love that slide, you can't beat America, look at this. Someone sent me this photograph. In America, you see this wonderful contradiction. There's a top slide. Look, childhood obesity, don't take it lightly. What's underneath? A McDonald's ad. Isn't that wonderful to get people to go to McDonald's and become obese? That's one of the big reasons for obesity. McDonald's is the work of Satan. Is that clear? Don't go there. That's my advice. Now, so the question then was, what's going on with this disease? Well, it turns out, when you're obese, your fat tissue is all bloated, all this fat everywhere. Guess what tries to handle that fat stuff? It's the macrophage. And the macrophage, remember, its job is to sense infection and bad stuff. And it turns out all this fat is very bad for you, and the macrophage, whose day job it is to deal with bad stuff, goes into the fat tissue. And this is from my lab. These green cells are macrophages. They've gone into an obese person's fat tissue. And they're taking up all this fat and getting really, really irritated. And these macrophages then somehow make your body less responsive to insulin. And we don't know quite, that's not a good question. Why would that be? It's not clear why. But we do know this is the key cell type that goes crazy during obesity and causes all this inflammation. And then very importantly, to give an example, that was a good discovery anyway. I mean, who would have thought that your fat gets full of these macrophages and they get really annoyed and get irritated and they cause inflammation, and then for some reason your body is shocked in some way and stops responding to insulin and glucose builds up. That's what's really happening. It's like a shock response. And then we wonder, could we block this and put it right, if you like, because people will not stop eating, you know, that's the trouble. People keep eating, and if you lose weight, the type 2 diabetes will go away. So they want a drug that will help them. And this drug here, we developed this with Pfizer, a drug company, it's called CRIT3. This drug will block this NLRP3 protein very nicely. And here's a bit of data for you now. So this is an experiment where we're looking at feeding glucose, okay, and then giving insulin, just giving it to see if it will work. And the blood glucose levels fall. And the black line, blood glucose is falling after insulin, right? That cell's taking up the glucose, right? These are obese mice. Now we do stuff on animals before we go to humans, because you can't test things on humans first, because it could be too dangerous. These are very obese mice. They're able to take up some of the glucose, because it's a bit active, but not fully active. Give them our drug, and look, a lot more glucose now is cleared. The green line is the clearing of glucose from the blood in response to insulin in a fat mouse. Okay, which normally wouldn't respond that well. So what's happened here is our drug, which takes out this NLRP3 protein, this key macrophage protein, blocks that pathway, stops the macrophages getting irritated. And now that mouse is now normal. In fact, that green line, that mouse has been cured of type 2 diabetes. And it's a very exciting thing. Will it work in humans? We don't know. That's the really holy grail here. If we could translate this into humans, fantastic, you know. And we're developing this drug now further with Pfizer, and trying to make this work more and more. And could this be a highly selective way to stop NLRP3? Now, what's very exciting about this, one last bit to say on this. The macrophage, remember that cell again, goes into fat tissue, tries to handle all the fat, gets really annoyed and causes type 2 diabetes. Equally, in Alzheimer's disease, in that disease, in your brain, these noxious proteins build up called beta amyloid. It's called plaque, right? And that's in the Alzheimer's brain. Again, the macrophage goes into the brain, tries to get rid of all that plaque, because that's its job, get rid of noxious things, gets really irritated again, and starts to cause inflammation. And it turns out NLRP3 is also in Alzheimer's. So again, we might see a function for this whole system then in Alzheimer's as well, and we're very keen to follow it up. So who would have thought that discovery would have happened? Now what that tells us is, that fourth reason, you know, if you do science, it can bring great benefits, is a really good reason to do science anyway. The other three are equally important, right? Most scientists are not sort of targeting cancer or arthritis, they're just curious, they just want to find out about the world. Because lesson number one, is the only way to understand the world. And then number two, all that counts is your ability. What a great, like sport, you know, great thing, just do it, and if you're good, you're going to do well. Thirdly, the thrill of discovery is the biggest fun thing of all. It's a bit like when you solve a cryptic crossword puzzle, you feel suddenly very pleased with yourself. That's what science does for people, because you feel a great sense of satisfaction. And then fourthly, it can bring great benefits. So there are 4 reasons to become a scientist. Now, but remember, it's very, very tough. If science was easy, we'd have cured cancer. We would have cured diabetes, would have cured Alzheimer's. All those diseases would have been cracked. It's very difficult to reveal and discover things. Very, very tough indeed. But that's what makes it great, I guess, because we all like challenges. And I give an example of this. This is a great way to look at science now. And this is a great guy who inspires many of us scientists. Probably heard of him. Ernest Shackleton is his name. Did you ever hear of him? He was a famous explorer, was Irish, and he went to Antarctica. And his ship got stuck. Did you ever hear this story? And he was stuck there for ages. Rescued all his crew, nobody died. Great leader. But the reason why we love him is, and this ad is really telling, I think, and I often show this to illustrate how tough it can be. He tried to recruit for that mission to the South Pole, right? And he stuck an ad in the London Times. And this ad is very famous because this ad should never have worked. It's used as an example of like marketing that goes wrong and actually works properly, right? So it's a strange ad. And there's the ad, look at this. Men wanted, it says, for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. Now who in all that's holy would apply for that? He got 4,000 people replied to that ad. 4,000 people, okay? Because of the last sentence, look at that, honour and recognition in case of success. And that's what science is all about. It's very tough. It's like long, dark winters. I mean, in my lab, I have 22 people. Probably 90% of the time, things aren't working. The experiment goes wrong, or you drop the test tube, or your idea was wrong. It's my fault. You know, if the idea is wrong, you're doomed for about 2 years till you find the idea was wrong. So it's tough, very, very tough. But honour, what honour means is it's a good thing to do for everybody. It's a good thing for society. And recognition, if you do well, you will be recognised, and we all like a bit of recognition. And that really captures what science is all about. And Shackleton is an inspiration. He went into Antarctica as a scientist to discover more about the Antarctic, and we use that as our inspiration. Now, what I would say is this, occasionally, you know, what do you do in the lab if things don't work? And very often I have ideas and I wonder, are they correct or not? So what you can do now is you can tweet God. You know God tweets? And there he is. So there's God. Anybody on Twitter? So there's God. You ought to follow God's great. So God, he's got about 1 million followers. See that? 1 million followers are following God. This is real now. It's God's own tweet. He only follows one person. Who do you think God follows? Not me, thank you, Tom. Well, it's a bit obvious who God follows, really. Justin Bieber has 40 million followers, but I show that because, you know, we like Twitter. Now, by the way, Twitter's a great thing for science because it's full of all this fantastic information. And if you want to come and join us, there's the real lab, okay? So this is on Pierce Street in Trinity. This is our brand new building. It's called the Trinity Biomedical Sciences Institute. And we're all in there doing all this medical research. And I'm the director of that building, so I'm kind of in charge of it. 5 different schools have come together in that building to do medical research. We've got medicine, biochemistry and immunology, and I'm an immunologist, pharmacy, organic chemistry and bioengineering. There are 55 labs with people like me in charge in that building. There are 500 medical researchers, as we speak, hopefully, in those labs, doing all these experiments, trying to find things out. And that's what it's all about. And out of that building, then, are coming all these great discoveries, hopefully. And these discoveries are fascinating in science, and maybe ultimately they will give rise to new medicines for all these horrible diseases. And you're all very welcome to come and join us. And thank you very much for your attention.